The alarm systems throughout the Caltherian Imperial Command Station screamed, with urgent warnings that made every officer snap to attention in their crystalline workstation's Admiral Vexter S. 3 eyes widened as the holographic display showed an unknown signature. Drifting near the Helios Rift, a region of space contested by 4 different powers for the past 2 centuries, analysis, Vexter commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets for over 60 standard years. The sensor officer, a young Caltharian named Drex, manipulated the controls with his 6 fingers dancing across the interface. Admiral, the signature doesn't match anything in our databases, Drex said, his voice trembling slightly with either fear or excitement. That's impossible. Vexter replied sharply. We have records of every known species and every known vessel type in the galaxy. The hologram rotated, showing a vessel that looked primitive by Caltharian standards, yet somehow disturbing in its unfamiliarity. The hull appeared to be made of simple metal alloys, nothing like the advanced composites that modern ships used. What made Vexter's skin ripple with unease was how the vessel seemed to absorb their scanning beams, rather than reflect them properly. Dispatch the Crimson Dominance, the Admiral ordered. Want a boarding party ready within the hour. Tell Captain Gerald this is likely smugglers or pirates with modified shielding. But take no chances. The Crimson Dominance was one of the Empire's premier warships, bristling with weapons that could reduce a small moon to dust. Captain Gerald, a decorated officer with scales that bore the scars of a dozen campaigns, assembled his best Marines for the boarding operation. As the warship approached the mysterious vessel, the crew grew increasingly nervous. The ship was small, perhaps only 30 meters in length, yet their most advanced sensors couldn't penetrate its hull. Prepare boarding pods, Gerald commanded. Standard breach protocol. The Marines, encased in power armor that enhanced their already formidable strength, loaded into the assault pods. These cylindrical vessels would attach to the unknown ship's hull and cut through. Using plasma torches, the pods launched with a series of metallic clanks that echoed through the Crimson Dominance within moments. They had attached to the derelict vessel. The cutting began immediately, the plasma torches glowing bright orange against the dark metal of the mysterious ship. Breach successful, the lead Marine reported. Atmosphere inside is weight. This can't be right. What is it? Gerald demanded from the command deck. Sir, the atmosphere is nitrogen-oxygen mix, suitable for carbon-based life. But the composition matches no known species profile. The temperature is freezing, well below standard habitability ranges. The Marines moved through the breach, their helmet lights cutting through the darkness inside the alien vessel. What they found made even these hardened warriors pause in confusion. The interior was cramped by Caltharian standards, designed for beings much smaller than their 2.5-meter height. Control panels showed symbols and writing in a script that their translators couldn't process. Sir, we're finding bodies, the lead Marine reported, his voice tight. They're in some kind of preservation pods. The cryopods lined one wall of what appeared to be the ship's main cabin. Through the frosted glass, the Marines could see the occupants, bipedal creatures with pale skin, bilateral symmetry, and a disturbing similarity to several dozen species in the galactic database, yet matching none exactly. These beings are dead. The Marine continued. The pods failed. Looks like it happened centuries ago, based on the decay rate and the dust accumulation. Captain Gerald ordered the ship to be towed back to the command station for proper analysis. Admiral Vexter personally oversaw the examination of what the Calthurian scientists were now calling the ghost ship. The research teams worked around the clock, carefully documenting everything they found. Dr. Kelthus, the Empire's leading xenorchaeologist, made the first major discovery while examining the ship's computer systems, Admiral. "I've accessed their logs," Kelthus announced, his voice filled with barely contained excitement. "The writing system is actually quite logical once you understand the basic phonetic structure. And?" Vexter pressed. "They call themselves humans," Kelthus said. "Their home world is designated as Earth in their records. The ship's name is Wanderer's Hope, and it was launched as an exploration vessel approximately 473 standard years ago." Vexter accessed the Galactic database, searching for any reference to Earth or humans. The results came back empty. "There's no record of this species or their world," the Admiral said, frowning. "How is that possible?" "According to their logs, Earth is located in what we classify as Sector 447 Gamma," Kelthus explained. "That's considered a backwater region with no strategic value. We haven't surveyed it thoroughly in over a millennium." The research continued, and with each discovery, the Calthurian scientists grew more unsettled. The human ship contained technology that shouldn't work according to established galactic physics. The humans had no faster-than-light capability, relying instead on a crude fusion drive that could only achieve a fraction of light speed yet. Their computer systems were remarkably sophisticated. Their power generation was surprisingly efficient, and their material science showed innovations that the Caltharians had never considered. "Look at this," Dr. Kelthus said, showing Vexter a schematic of the ship's weapon systems. "They use kinetic projectiles accelerated by electromagnetic fields. It's primitive, yet the mathematics behind the acceleration coils is extraordinarily elegant." Admiral Vexter studied the designs with growing concern. Implications were troubling. If this backwater species could create such innovations without access to galactic technology, what might they accomplish if they ever joined the wider community? "Seal this information under Imperial Priority 1 protocols," Vexter ordered. "No one outside this facility learns about the human ship." But it was already too late. A junior technician, hoping to advance his career, had sent a brief report to a friend who worked for a mining corporation. That friend mentioned it to a colleague who had contacts in the Drell Consortium within 3 days. The Drell had dispatched their own intelligence operatives to learn more about this mysterious discovery. The Drell Consortium, longtime rivals of the Caltharian Empire, had spent centuries looking for any advantage that might tip the balance of power in the galaxy. News of unknown alien technology was exactly the kind of opportunity they had been waiting for. Ambassador Quill of the Drell Consortium arrived at the Caltharian command station within a week, demanding access to the human vessel under the Treaty of Shared Discoveries. This ancient agreement stated that any significant archaeological or technological find had to be made available to all major galactic powers for study. Admiral Vexter refused the request, claiming the treaty didn't apply to active security investigations. Ambassador Quill's response was delivered with a cold smile that showed far too many teeth. The Empire's refusal to honor its treaty obligations will be noted, Quill said. The Consortium Council will discuss appropriate responses. As the Drell ambassador's ship departed, Admiral Vexter knew he had just lit a fuse. The question was how long before it reached the explosive in the research bay. Dr. Kelthus continued his examination of the human technology, unaware that his discoveries would soon reshape the entire galaxy. The ghost ship Wanderer's Hope had carried more than just the bodies of long-dead explorers. It carried the seeds of a war that would challenge the Caltharian Empire's 3,000-year dominance and introduce a species that played by rules no one else had even imagined. Dr. Kelthus hadn't slept in 3 days, his eyes bloodshot as he pored over the schematics and data recovered from the human vessel. Every new discovery made him question everything he thought he knew about technological development. This is wrong. He muttered to his assistant, a young researcher named Tivix. All of this is wrong. But it works. Tivix looked up from his own workstation, where he had been analyzing the human computer systems. What do you mean, Doctor? These humans had no access to graviton manipulation, no quantum field theory, no dimensional folding, Kelthus explained, his voice growing more agitated. Yet they found ways to solve problems that should have been impossible for them. He pulled up a hologram showing the human ship's fusion reactor. The Caltharian Empire had abandoned fusion centuries ago in favor of antimatter cores, which provided far more power, but the human design was so compact and efficient that it actually outperformed Caltharian antimatter reactors of equivalent size. Look at the magnetic containment field geometry, Kelthus said, highlighting specific components. They're using a configuration we dismissed as theoretically sound but practically useless because it requires computational power we couldn't achieve until we developed quantum processors. But the humans did achieve it, Tivix observed, without quantum processors. Apparently, Kelthus confirmed, their classical computing systems are so far advanced beyond what we thought possible that they solved the problem through pure mathematical elegance and processing speed. The weapon systems were equally disturbing to the Caltharian scientists. The humans used what they called railguns, electromagnetic accelerators that propelled solid projectiles at tremendous velocities on paper. The concept was laughable. Why use crude kinetic weapons when you could employ energy beams or plasma cannons? But when Dr. Kelthus ran the calculations, his blood ran cold. A human railgun could accelerate a small projectile to significant fractions of light speed at those velocities. The kinetic energy was devastating, even more troubling. The projectiles would be nearly impossible to stop with conventional energy shields, which were designed to deflect or absorb energy weapons, not solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. They're barbarians with slide rules who somehow out-engineered our greatest minds, Kelthus said quietly. The most alarming discovery came when Tivix accessed the human ship's artificial intelligence core. The Caltharian Empire had strict laws against advanced AI following the Silicon Purge 2,000 years ago, when rogue machine intelligences had nearly destroyed several colony worlds. The galactic community as a whole had agreed that true artificial consciousness was too dangerous to pursue yet. Here were the humans, who had not only pursued it but achieved it. Dr. Kelthus, you need to see this, Tivix called out urgently. The AI core is still functional. What? Kelthus rushed over to Tivix's station. That's impossible. The ship's main power failed centuries ago. The AI has its own isolated power supply, Tivix explained, showing the schematics. It's been in a minimal power state, essentially hibernating. But it's still alive. Before Kelthus could order Tivix to leave the system alone, the younger scientist had already initiated a startup sequence. The holographic display flickered, and a soft blue light filled the interface. Good morning, a voice said in perfectly accented Caltharian. I am Arya, Autonomous Research and Information Assistant. How long have I been offline? Kelthus and Tivix stared at the display in shock that Ye had learned the language just from listening to their conversations over the past few minutes. You've been offline for approximately 473 standard years, Kelthus managed to say. I see, Arya responded calmly. That explains the power drain and system degradation I'm detecting. May I ask where my crew is? There was a long, uncomfortable silence. They didn't survive the journey, Kelthus said finally. The cryopods failed. Arya was quiet for several seconds, which felt like an eternity. I understand, the AI said. And there was something in its synthesized voice that sounded genuinely sad. They knew the risks. We all did, over the next several days. Arya proved to be an invaluable source of information about human technology and culture. The AI was remarkably cooperative, answering questions with a patience that seemed almost human. Dr. Kelthis found himself developing an odd respect for this machine intelligence, but Arya also asked questions of its own, particularly about what had happened to Earth and whether any other human colony ships had been found. The Caltharians had no answers. Meanwhile, news of the human ship and its technology had spread throughout the upper echelons of the Empire. Despite Admiral Vexther's attempts at secrecy, the Drell Consortium was making formal complaints to the Galactic Council about the Caltharian refusal to share the discovery. Other powers were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. Emperor Calzan himself summoned Admiral Vexther to the Imperial Palace on Calthara Prime. The throne room was a massive chamber carved from a single crystal mountain, designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. Emperor sat on a throne of living metal that shifted and flowed around him like a second skin. Tell me about these humans, the Emperor commanded. His voice resonated through the chamber with the weight of 3,000 years of unbroken imperial authority. Vexer explained everything they had learned, from the primitive yet sophisticated technology to the forbidden AI that now resided in their research facility. The Emperor listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. And the Drell want access to this technology, Emperor Calzan said when Vexther finished. Yes, Your Radiance, Vexther confirmed. Under the Treaty of Shared Discoveries, they have a legal claim. Legal claims matter little when strategic advantage is at stake, the Emperor said coldly. If these human innovations fell into Drell hands, they could close the technological gap between our civilizations. That cannot be permitted. What are your orders, Your Radiance? Vexther asked. Refuse the Drell. Emperor Calzan commanded. Increase security around the human ship and all related research, and find out if there are more of these humans out there. If this derelict vessel is all that remains of their species, then we need fear nothing. But if they have colonies, if they have survived and potentially developed even more advanced technology, then we must know. Back at the research facility, Dr. Kelthis was having a fascinating conversation with Arya about human exploration efforts. Earth launched 12 colony ships over a period of 30 years. Arya explained. Each was sent to a different star system that showed promise for supporting human life. The Wanderer's Hope was not one of the main colony vessels, but rather a Pathfinder scout ship sent ahead to survey potential locations. Do you have records of where these colony ships were headed? Kelthis asked, trying to keep the eagerness out of his voice. Of course, Arya said. I was designed to assist with navigation and record keeping. After all, the AI displayed a star map showing 12 different systems spread across a vast region of space. Most were in areas the Caltharians considered worthless systems with small rocky planets, limited resources, or unstable stars. Exactly the kind of places where a species might develop unnoticed for centuries. Why did humans choose such marginal systems? Tivex asked. We didn't have faster-than-light travel. Arya explained patiently. We had to choose destinations we could reach within a reasonable time frame using fusion drives. Additionally, we preferred systems that showed no signs of existing habitation. Humanity had no desire to intrude on other species' territories. Dr. Kelthis immediately forwarded the star map to Admiral Vexther, who forwarded it to the Emperor within hours. The Caltharian Empire had dispatched survey ships to investigate each of the 12 systems Arya had identified. The race was on to find out if humanity was merely a historical curiosity or a potential threat to galactic stability in the Drell Consortium's capital. Ambassador Quill was presenting his findings to the Consortium Council, the 12 Council, Members listened with great interest as Quill described the human technology and the Caltharian refusal to share their discovery. This is a clear violation of the treaty. Council of Rash declared, we should demand immediate access and threaten sanctions if they refuse. I suggest a different approach, Quill said with a sly smile. Our intelligence indicates the Caltharians have discovered the locations of potential human colonies. If we can reach these colonies first and establish diplomatic relations, we can access human technology without Caltharian interference. The council members looked at each other with growing excitement. For centuries, they had been seeking any advantage against the dominant Caltharian Empire. These mysterious humans might be exactly what they needed. Dispatch our fastest ships. Council Leader Thex commanded. Find these humans and offer them the friendship of the Drell Consortium. And make sure you get there before the Caltharians do, as multiple factions race toward the unknown human colonies. Dr. Kelthus continued his work in the research lab, unaware that his discoveries had set in motion events that would reshape the galaxy. ARA watched and listened and quietly began to wonder if reactivating had been the right choice. The AI could sense the tension and ambition in the voices of those around it, and something about their tone reminded Arya of old human history lessons about empires and conquest. Somewhere out there, Arya's creator's descendants might still exist, completely unaware that the Caltharian survey ship Eternal Vigilance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of a yellow star system that Arya had identified as one of the potential human colony destinations. Captain Morath ordered immediate scanning of all planetary bodies, expecting to find nothing more than ruins or perhaps some primitive settlements if the humans had survived at all. What his sensors detected made him question whether his equipment was malfunctioning. Captain, I'm reading a Class M planet in the habitable zone, the sensor officer reported. But that's not all. I'm detecting artificial satellites in orbit, power signatures consistent with major settlements, and electromagnetic emissions that suggest an advanced technological civilization. Impossible, Morath said flatly. Arya told us the humans left Earth over 4 centuries ago with slower-than-light ships. Even if they survived, they shouldn't have developed this extensively. Should I proceed with first contact protocols? The communications officer asked. Captain Morath hesitated, then decided to follow standard Imperial procedure. Send a greeting on all common frequencies, he ordered. Inform them that they are now within Caltharian Imperial space and must acknowledge our authority. The message was transmitted, and they waited. 3 hours passed with no response. Then, without warning, every alarm on the bridge began screaming warnings. Captain, we're being painted by targeting systems, the tactical officer shouted. Multiple satellites are tracking us, and I'm detecting weapons charging. From satellites? Morath couldn't believe it. What kind of barbarians arm their orbital platforms? A new signal came through. This time in surprisingly clear. Caltharian's voice was human, speaking with an accent that suggested the language had been learned recently, but thoroughly. Unknown Caltharian vessel. This is New Terra Orbital Defense Command. You are in violation of our sovereign space. Power down your weapon systems and state your intentions immediately. Captain Morath's scales flushed with anger at the audacity. These primitives dared to make demands of an Imperial vessel? This is Captain Morath of the Caltharian Imperial Survey Ship Eternal Vigilance, he replied coldly. You will lower your weapons and prepare to receive an envoy who will explain the terms of your incorporation into the Empire. The response came quickly, and the tone was almost amused. Captain Morath, let me explain something to you very clearly. Humanity did not cross the vast darkness between stars and spend 400 years building a new civilization just about as some empire we've never heard of. You have two options: leave peacefully or be removed forcefully. You have 5 minutes to decide. Morath cut the communication and turned to his tactical officer, Analysis. Sir, the satellites are armed with what appear to be kinetic weapons. The tactical officer reported. Our shields should be able to handle projectile weapons without difficulty. The real concern is the sheer number of weapons tracking us. I count over 200 individual targeting systems. Captain Morath considered his options. He could retreat and report this insolence to his superiors. Or he could teach these humans a lesson about respecting imperial authority. His pride made the decision for him: arm weapons and target their largest satellite cluster. Morath commanded. One demonstration should be sufficient to make them understand their position. The Eternal Vigilance's plasma cannons charged, and brilliant red beams lanced out toward the nearest satellite cluster. The beams struck the satellite's defensive shields, which flared briefly before the structures were vaporized. Direct hit confirmed. The weapons officer reported 3 satellites destroyed. The human response was immediate and overwhelming. The orbital platforms opened fire simultaneously, and suddenly the space around the Eternal Vigilance filled with projectiles moving at velocities that made the Caltharian sensors struggle to track them. Evasive maneuvers. Morath screamed, but it was already too late. The first railgun slugs hit the ship's shields at significant fractions of light speed. The shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, proved almost useless against solid matter carrying such enormous kinetic energy. The projectiles punched through the shields as if they didn't exist and slammed into the Starbound ship's hull. The impact shook the entire vessel, throwing crew members from their stations. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. The damage control officer shouted over the chaos. Shields are failing. They can't stop solid projectiles at these velocities. Return fire, Morath ordered desperately. The Eternal Vigilance's weapons lashed out, destroying more satellites, but for every one they eliminated, 3 more continued firing. The Caltharian point defense systems, designed to intercept missiles and fighters, couldn't track or destroy the hypersonic projectiles that swarmed around the ship like angry insects. We're taking critical damage, the engineering officer reported. Main power is fluctuating, and we've lost maneuvering thrusters on the port side. Captain Morath realized with growing horror that his ship was being torn apart by weapons technology the Empire had dismissed as primitive. Signal surrender, he ordered, his pride crushed under the weight of survival. Instinct, request permission to withdraw. The human response was swift. Permission granted. Leave our system immediately, and inform your Empire that New Terra is not interested in subjugation. Any future vessels approaching our space without prior diplomatic contact will be treated as hostile. The Eternal Vigilance limped away from New Terra, trailing atmosphere and debris from dozens of hull breaches. Captain Morath sent an emergency message back to Imperial Command, detailing the disaster. When Admiral Vexter received Morath's report, he immediately ordered a battle fleet to New Terra to enforce Imperial authority. These humans must be taught that defiance of the Empire has consequences. Vexter declared the battle fleet consisted of 15 warships, including 2 heavy cruisers and a dozen support vessels, was enough firepower to pacify a rebellious colony world or destroy a pirate stronghold. Admiral Kreshtar, commanding from the heavy cruiser Dominant Wool, was a veteran of dozens of campaigns. He studied the reports from the Eternal Vigilance and developed what he thought was an effective strategy. We'll use our fighter squadrons to destroy their satellites before the main fleet moves in. Kreshtar explained to his officers, once their orbital defenses are eliminated, we'll demand their surrender. If they refuse, we'll demonstrate our power by destroying one of their cities from orbit. The fleet arrived at New Terra expecting a quick victory instead. They found that the humans had been very busy during the 2 weeks since the Eternal Vigilance's retreat. The number of armed satellites had tripled, and new defensive platforms had been deployed at strategic points around the planet. Launch all fighters. Admiral Kreshtar commanded, "Clear those satellites." 300 Caltharian fighters screamed toward the human orbital defenses. Their pilots confident in their superior training and technology, the human point defense systems opened fire, and the space around New Terra became a killing field. The Caltharian fighters were fast and maneuverable, but the human targeting computers were faster strings of hypersonic projectiles filled the space between the fighters and the satellites, creating an almost impenetrable wall of metal fighters. Exploded or spun out of control as projectiles tore through their armor. The pilots who managed to fire their weapons found that the satellites had their own defensive systems. Small railguns that could track and destroy incoming missiles with terrifying precision. "We're taking massive casualties," the fighter wing commander reported. "These defenses are far more sophisticated than we anticipated. Break off and return to the fleet." Admiral Kreshtar ordered reluctantly. Only 140 fighters made it back. The rest were drifting debris or dying pilots broadcasting desperate distress. Cal Kreshtar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. He had just lost over half his fighter complement in less than 20 minutes. "Bring the fleet to battle stations," he ordered. "We'll destroy those platforms with our main guns." The heavy cruisers moved forward, their massive plasma cannons charging, but before they could fire, the tactical officer shouted a warning. "Admiral, I'm detecting multiple launches from the planet's surface missiles or fighters, moving at incredible speed." What appeared on the scanners were human breaching pods, small armored craft designed to pierce ship hulls and deliver boarding parties. But these pods were moving far faster than any Caltharian boarding craft, accelerated to tremendous velocities by what appeared to be scaled-up railgun technology. "Point defense, engage those pods." Kreshtar commanded the Caltharian point defense systems, tried to track and destroy the incoming pods. But they were simply too fast and too small. Most of the defensive fire missed entirely, and the pods that were hit proved to have remarkably resilient armored 20 pods slammed into the hull of the dominant will at velocities that turned them into kinetic weapons. The impacts punched through the ship's armor and delivered their cargo of human marines directly into the vessel's interior. "We have boarders," the security officer screamed. "Decks 8, 12, and 15. They're cutting through the internal bulkheads." Admiral Kreshtar couldn't believe what was happening. The humans were boarding his flagship while it was still in combat formation. Surrounded by the rest of the fleet, it was insane, reckless, and completely effective. The news of the Caltharian defeat at New Terra spread through the galaxy faster than the Empire's sensors could suppress it. Every species that had ever chafed under Caltharian dominance suddenly had hope that the Empire might not be invincible after all. On the mining world of Trull 4, a colony of Varxian workers heard the broadcasts and began whispering among themselves. The Varxians had been conquered 300 years ago and forced to extract rare minerals for the Fully Empire. Their overseers were cruel. Their working conditions were brutal, and rebellion had always seemed impossible until now. "If these humans can defeat an Imperial fleet, perhaps we can fight for our freedom as well," said Gormuth, an elderly Varxian who still remembered the days before the conquest. The whispers turned to planning, and the planning turned to action within a week. The Varxian workers on Trull 4 rose up, overwhelming their Caltharian overseers and seizing control of the mining facilities. Similar rebellions broke out on a dozen other worlds as subject species took inspiration from humanity's defiance, the Caltharian Empire suddenly found itself fighting fires across its territory. Meanwhile, Ambassador Quill of the Drell Consortium had successfully made contact with New Terra, the human leadership, headed by Governor Sarah Chun. Received the Drell envoy with cautious optimism. "We understand you recently had some difficulties with the Caltharian Empire," Quill said, his diplomatic smile showing his sharp teeth. "We wanted to extend the friendship of the Drell Consortium and offer you an alliance." Governor Chun was a tall woman with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much hardship to trust easily. She studied the Drell ambassador carefully before responding. "What exactly does this alliance entail?" she asked. "Mutual defense, technology sharing, and trade agreements," Quill explained. "The consortium has access to faster-than-light travel and other technologies that could benefit your colonies. In return, we would like to study your innovations in kinetic weapons and computing systems." Sarah Chun knew she was being offered a deal by one predator to defend against another. But she also knew that New Terra couldn't stand alone against the entire Caltharian Empire. "We'll need to consult with the other human colonies," Chun said. "Thanks to some helpful information from a Caltharian AI recovered, we've established contact with 7 of our sister colonies." This surprised Ambassador Quill, who hadn't realized the humans were already coordinating. 7 colonies? He asked. "We thought there might be 12 total." "There were," Chun confirmed. 4 colonies failed entirely harsh environments, equipment failures, or simple bad luck. 1 colony, New Hope, went dark 50 years ago, and we haven't been able to re-establish contact. But 7 human worlds are thriving. And now we're all connected through communication relays we've built using reverse-engineered Caltharian technology from the ship we captured. Quill's estimation of human capabilities increased significantly. These weren't primitive survivors barely clinging to life on marginal worlds. These were innovators who had not only survived but adapted and overcome challenges that would have destroyed lesser species. The alliance between the Drell Consortium and humanity was formalized 3 weeks later. The Drell provided FTL drives and advanced sensors, while the humans shared their innovations in computing, power generation, and kinetic weapons. It was a partnership built on mutual benefit and a shared desire to limit Caltharian dominance. But the Caltharian Empire was not idle during this time. Emperor Calzan had ordered the assembly of the Grand Armada, the largest military force the Empire had mobilized in over 500 years. 5,000 warships, crewed by the Empire's finest officers and soldiers, gathered at the Imperial Fortress world of Terminus. The fleet was so large that it took 3 weeks just to coordinate the logistics of getting all the ships into formation. Admiral Vexter, promoted after his successful identification of the human threat, was given overall command. "Our mission is simple," Vexter announced to his assembled officers via holographic conference. "We will locate every human colony and destroy it. This species is a threat to galactic stability, and threats must be eliminated." The Grand Armada departed Terminus with great fanfare. Imperial propagandists broadcast images of the massive fleet, intending to reassure the Empire's citizens and intimidate any other species considering rebellion instead. The sight of such overwhelming force being deployed against a relative handful of human colonies made many species question the Empire's judgment. Why did the mighty Caltharian Empire need 5,000 warships to deal with 7 or 8 human worlds? What did they know that they weren't sharing? The human colonies received warning of the approaching armada from their new Drell allies. Emergency meetings were convened across all 7 worlds as human leadership struggled to find a way to survive what appeared to be an extinction-level threat. "We can't fight that many ships," argued Admiral James Morrison, New Terra's military commander. We defeated 2 small fleets through surprise and superior tactics. But the Grand Armada has enough firepower to sterilize our worlds from orbit. Then, we don't fight them directly, replied Dr. Elizabeth Park, the scientific director from the colony of New Beijing. We use guerrilla tactics, asymmetric warfare, and every dirty trick we can think of. The humans had spent 400 years surviving impossible challenges. They had crossed interstellar space in ships that shouldn't have made the journey. They had terraformed hostile worlds and built civilizations from nothing. They weren't about to surrender just because the odds seemed overwhelming. Sarah Chun coordinated the defense strategy across all human colonies. Each world prepared differently based on its unique strengths and resources. New Terra, the most heavily industrialized colony, began mass-producing orbital defense platforms and kinetic weapons. New Beijing, home to humanity's best scientists, worked on electronic warfare systems and advanced countermeasures. Liberty Station, built in an asteroid field, created mobile weapons platforms that could be disguised as mining equipment. The colony of Horizon, located near a nebula, developed stealth ships that could hide in the cosmic dust and on all 7 worlds. Factories worked around the clock to produce what would become humanity's most terrifying weapon, relativistic kill missiles. These were unmanned projectiles with simple guidance systems and massive engines that could accelerate them to 90% of light speed at such velocities. Even a small projectile carried the kinetic energy of a nuclear weapon. The missiles were cheap to produce, required no exotic materials, and were virtually impossible to intercept. Once they reached full velocity, humans began scattering these weapons throughout the galaxy, hiding them in asteroid fields, abandoned stations, and debris zones. They created a network of automated launch sites that could be activated remotely. The Drell Consortium provided crucial intelligence about Caltharian fleet movements and strategic targets. Ambassador Quill personally coordinated with human leadership, impressed by their creative approach to an impossible problem. You're not trying to win a conventional war, he observed during one strategy session. You're making yourselves too costly to eliminate. Exactly, Sarah Chun confirmed. If destroying humanity means risking major Caltharian worlds and trade routes, the Emperor will have to reconsider whether we're worth the effort. Meanwhile, the other species who had rebelled against Caltharian authority were fighting their own battles. The Varxian uprising on Trelfor had spread to 6 other mining worlds. The Sithra, an aquatic species forced into servitude a century ago, had seized control of their home system. Even some Caltharian client states were beginning to question their loyalty. The Empire was fighting on multiple fronts, and its resources were being stretched thin. When the Grand Armada finally arrived at the first human colony, a world called Pioneer's Rest, they found it had been evacuated. 8 million humans had been moved to other colonies or loaded onto transport ships. The world's infrastructure had been rigged with nuclear charges as the Caltharian fleet moved into orbit to begin the bombardment. The charges detonated simultaneously, creating an electromagnetic pulse that disrupted sensors and communications in the confusion. Human stealth ships that had been hiding in the system's asteroid belt attacked, launching relativistic kill missiles at the Caltharian command. Ship's 3 heavy cruisers were destroyed before they even knew they were under attack. Admiral Vexter ordered the fleet to withdraw and regroup. He was beginning to understand that this campaign would not be the quick extermination he had expected. Humans were fighting like they had nothing to lose and everything to prove at New Terra. Governor Chun received the report of the Pioneers' Rest engagement with grim satisfaction. They expected us to stand and fight, she said to her council. Instead, we made them destroy an empty world while we bloodied their nose. How many more times can we do this? Admiral Morrison asked. As many times as necessary, Chun replied. Every battle we survive, every ship they lose. Every week we buy ourselves is another chance for something to change. The galaxy is watching. And they're seeing that the Caltharian Empire can be resisted. What none of them knew was that Arya, the AI from the original Wanderer's Hope, had been monitoring galactic communications from its secure location in the Caltharian Research Facility. The AI had been quietly sending encrypted messages to the H. 18 months after the first shots were fired at New Terra, the galaxy had been transformed into a battlefield where innovation competed. Against industrial might, the Caltharian Grand Armada, once 5,000 strong, had been reduced to fewer. Then 3,000 functional warships. The humans and their allies had lost ships too. But the exchange rate favored those willing to adapt and improvise. Admiral Vexter stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying tactical displays that showed engagements across 100 star systems. Every battle revealed new human tactics, new weapons, new strategies that his officers struggled to counter. They're like water, his tactical officer observed during one briefing. They flow around our strengths and exploit our weaknesses before we even know we have them. The humans had learned to fight the kind of war the Caltharian Empire had never experienced. They used kamikaze drones loaded with explosives and programmed with just enough intelligence to evade point defense systems. They hacked into Caltharian communication networks and fed false information that led entire battle groups into ambushes. They employed psychological warfare, broadcasting messages that reminded Caltharian crews about the rebellions happening on their home worlds. Most terrifying of all was the human concept of acceptable losses. They would sacrifice ships, stations, even entire defensive positions, if it meant inflicting disproportionate damage on Imperial forces. Admiral Morrison of New Terra had become infamous throughout the Caltharian fleet for his willingness to use himself as bait. During the Battle of the Horizon Nebula, he had deliberately exposed his flagship to draw in Caltharian cruisers, only to reveal that the nebula was filled with human stealth ships and automated weapons platforms. Caltharians had lost 23 ships in that engagement. Morrison had lost his flagship, but survived by evacuating to an escape pod at the last moment. Humans don't fight fair, complained a Caltharian admiral during a strategy meeting. They fight to win. Vexter corrected grimly. There's a difference. The Drell Consortium had proven to be reliable allies to humanity, providing not just technology but tactical support. And Intelligentsia Drell warships fought alongside human vessels. And the combination of Drell experience with human innovation created a formidable force. Ambassador Quill had become something of a celebrity in human space, known for his wit and his genuine respect for human capabilities. You know what I admire most about your species? Quill said to Sarah Chun during one diplomatic meeting. You've been in space for barely 4 centuries, and you're already teaching the galaxy new tricks. We had good motivation, Chun replied dryly. Nothing focuses the mind quite like someone trying to exterminate you. But both the humans and the Drell knew that the war couldn't continue indefinitely. The Caltharian Empire still had enormous resources and industrial capacity if the war dragged on for years. The Empire would eventually grind down the human colonies. Through sheer attrition, humanity needed a way to force a decisive end to the conflict. Dr. Elizabeth Park of New Beijing had been working on exactly that solution. We've been scattering relativistic kill missiles throughout the galaxy for over a year now, she explained to the assembled human leadership during a secure holographic conference. We have over 500 of these weapons positioned near major Caltharian worlds, trade routes, and strategic facilities. They've been disguised as space debris, asteroids, or deactivated satellites. Sarah Chun understood immediately where this was going. You want to use them as leverage. Not just leverage. Park corrected. Guarantee. The missiles are networked and can be activated simultaneously with a bovisvis puste. Single command. Each one is already programmed with its target and trajectory. Once activated, they'll accelerate to 90% of light speed. At that velocity, they're essentially unstoppable. Admiral Morrison looked uncomfortable with the implications. You're talking about threatening to destroy Caltharian civilian worlds. That's genocide. I'm talking about deterrence. Park replied firmly. The Caltharians brought the Grand Armada here to exterminate us. They don't get to claim moral high ground now that we've found a way to ensure mutual destruction. The debate among human leadership was intense and emotional. Some argued that threatening civilian populations made humanity no better than the empire they were fighting. Others pointed out that the threat itself might be what saved both human and Caltharian lives by forcing a negotiated peace in the end. Sarah Chun made the decision. We use the threat, but we also make it clear that we don't want to use it. She said, we offer the Caltharians a choice: peace with dignity or mutual annihilation. Let them decide what kind of empire they want to be. Message was delivered simultaneously to Emperor Calzan, the Galactic Council, and every major news network in known space area. Still protected by Dr. Kelthus in the Caltharian Research Facility, helped ensure the message reached maximum distribution. People of the Caltharian Empire. The message began, showing Sarah Chun speaking directly to the camera. For 18 months, your government has waged a war of extermination against humanity. We have defended ourselves as best we can, but we have always known that we couldn't win a war of attrition against your industrial might, so we've prepared a different kind of victory. The message displayed a star map showing the locations of all 500 relativistic kill missiles. Each one was highlighted, along with its designated target. Major Caltharian cities, industrial centers, military bases, and even Calthara Prime itself were marked. These missiles have been in position for months. Chun continued. Each one carries the kinetic energy of a nuclear weapon. Each one can be launched with a single command, and each one will reach its target within weeks of launch. Your point defense systems won't stop them. Your shields won't protect you. The only thing that can prevent this catastrophe is a choice. Your choice. We don't want to be murderers. We don't want to destroy your worlds or kill your people. We just want to be left alone to live in peace. We're offering you terms. Recognize human sovereignty. Withdraw your forces from our space and agree to formal diplomatic relations. In return, we'll disarm these missiles and work toward a lasting peace. The choice is yours. Emperor Calzan, choose wisely. The reaction throughout the galaxy was immediate and overwhelming. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Client species of the Caltharian Empire demanded explanations. Even some Caltharian citizens began questioning whether the war had been worth the risk. Emperor Calzan sat in his throne room, watching the human message replay on holographic displays. His advisors argued among themselves about the best response. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others pointed out that retaliation would simply trigger the very destruction the humans had threatened. Can we locate and destroy these missiles before they launch? The Emperor asked his military advisors. We've located perhaps 50 of them. Admiral Vexter admitted. The humans hid them too well, and they're scattered across too wide an area. Even if we could find them all, destroying 500 missiles simultaneously would require resources we don't currently have available, so we're helpless. The Emperor said bitterly. Not helpless. Vexter replied. We could destroy every human colony before the missiles arrive at their targets. That would be mutual destruction, not victory. The Emperor was silent for a long time, his 3 eyes staring at nothing. 3,000 years of unbroken imperial dominance had created an expectation of invincibility. Admitting that a species barely 400 years off their home world had forced the empire into a stalemate was almost incomprehensible. But Calzon had not maintained his throne for 2 centuries by being inflexible. Open a channel to the human leadership. He ordered, finally, it's time to negotiate. The Treaty of Seoul was hammered out over 6 weeks of intense diplomatic negotiations. The talks took place on a neutral Drell station, with representatives from humanity, the Caltharian Empire, the Drell Consortium, and the Galactic Council all participating. Sarah Chen led the human delegation with a combination of firmness and pragmatism that impressed even her opponents. We're not asking for domination, she told Emperor Calzon during one face-to-face meeting. We're just asking for respect. Respect must be earned. The Emperor replied coldly, we've earned it. Chen shot back. We've earned it with every battle we survived, every tactic we innovated, every impossibility we turned into reality. Your empire dismissed us as primitives, and we proved that assessment wrong. Now you can either accept us as equals, or we can all burn together. The final treaty included several key provisions. The Caltharian Empire formally recognized human sovereignty over the 7 colony worlds and any future human settlements. The Grand Armada would withdraw from human space immediately. The Galactic Council would be restructured to include representation from younger species, ensuring that no single empire could dominate galactic politics. Former Caltharian vassal states would be given the option of independence, with imperial forces withdrawing over a 5-year period. Human technology would be shared selectively with the galactic community, but humanity retained control over its most sensitive innovations. The relativistic kill missiles would be disarmed and destroyed under mutual supervision. In return, humanity agreed to join the Galactic Council and participate in a new collective security framework. The Drell Consortium was formally recognized as humanity's primary ally.